All right, well, welcome everyone. Thanks for joining us for our second quarter NG911 GIS user group. If you would, please mute. I don't hear anyone, but if you're joining us to listen in, mute your line, please. Feel free to always pop questions or comments in the chat, and then we'll have plenty of time at the end of the presentation to have questions then. So chime in anytime you'd like. All right, we're going to follow our standard agenda, which will start with project updates, which will be myself, and then also Sherry Massey has some important updates to present to everyone. And then Will Trimble will cover any toolbox updates, talking about validation tools and everything you go through to submit your data. And then Sherry will then cover GeoMSAG training and the other miscellaneous updates we have regarding the data. All right, so to start things off, I have exciting news. As you know, we have a contract with Surdex to once again acquire statewide imagery. It's again going to be the 1 foot resolution leaf off natural color. And I love putting this map up here because Surdex gives us access to their flight tracker as they're collecting the imagery. So it was so fun to watch these lines appear and airplanes moving around the state to collect this imagery. So the really great news is they were able to acquire and capture statewide imagery all this season. So they once again have, blown past our expectations. They never know if they can actually acquire the whole state in 1 year. It really depends on weather more than anything. So we got lucky. Weather cooperated. They had enough resources and planes in the area to just crank through and get the imagery acquired. So this was into the project. They'd already, for this year, they actually started on the eastern half of Kansas, kind of southeast, and then moved in more of a northern westerly fashion in collecting the imagery. Part of that was because they had a heavy concentration of local buy-up projects on the eastern half of the state. But I think that worked out well with the way things greened up and leafed out and everything, that should have gotten some really good imagery captured before we got too green out there. So that is fantastic news. So now that it's acquired, what's the next steps? Well, of course, we just sent them a whole bunch of a hard drive full of LiDAR data for the ground controls so they can start processing the imagery. And what will happen this fall sometime, we'll again ask everyone to help do the imagery QA, which you all have been awesome about helping in the past. So what they do is they put the preliminary imagery up in a service. You can access it through a login through a web browser, and allows you to in like a grid format to go through and like review the imagery at a grid tile at a time. And if you see anything, like some bridge warp or anything that looks weird, put your comments in there, and then Surdex reviews those comments and makes adjustments as necessary. So we really appreciate everyone's help in going through QA, because QAing statewide imagery, that's a lot of imagery to look at. So we couldn't do it without you guys. We'll be in touch about that when we're closer to knowing when we'll have access to that tool. It's called SurCheck. And I'm guessing it'll be fall sometime before we even see the imagery for QA. And then with that, the delivery timeline just kind of depends. Depending on what we found and the processing and everything, I wouldn't anticipate really anything probably being delivered to DASC until early 2025. I mean, it does take a full year to process all this imagery and QA it and get it tiled the right way and projected and actually delivered. So that means, probably be, hopefully just under a year from now that we'll start seeing this imagery in the rapid deploy radius call handling mapping software, and then actually have it out on the DASC website for download. So I know we're all excited to get our hands on it, but you'll be rewarded with your patience when the imagery is actually processed and QA'd and ready for the public and for our call handling software. Just a reminder, the local buy-up option is still available. So if you're ever interested in that, just shoot me an email and I'll put you in touch with our contact, Jack King at Surdex, and he'll work on defining your area of interest and working up a quote for you as well. So great news. Imagery statewide has been acquired, and we'll continue to keep you updated on the progress of the QA and the delivery. All right. With that, I'm going to hand it off to Sherry. So Sherry, I see that you're highlighted like you're talking, but I don't hear anything. We'll give Sherry a minute to transition over. Like I said, going between Teams and Zoom and everything, there's always some of those friendly glitches that you run into. Let's see here. Well, make sure there's not something else coming through here. I'm wondering maybe why Sherry's working on that since we can't hear her. Will, why don't we skip ahead to Toolbox and then we'll come back to Sherry and let her work on her audio issues.
Sure, no problem. All right. Yeah, good morning, everybody. Kind of more of the same Toolbox stuff in a lot of ways. We're just kind of moving along. Some of this stuff's kind of been wrapped into some updates for the pro side of things. Yeah, we'll go over a couple things that should be coming up in either the next couple of weeks. If not, then it may roll into the next quarter so that we don't bump into the next submission time. But yeah, the major thing still is working ArcGIS Pro, Python 3 support. Probably gonna end up with limited pro toolbox. It'll be just a subset of the current Python 2 toolbox. The main thing with that is just that we're trying to avoid any kind of proprietary Esri locking of the data in the databases downline for our partners that are working with using our data for the self-host system. So that was kind of our last hurdle. So now at this point, we're just making sure that the toolbox changes are all set and ready to go and ready to roll out. And then along with that, we'll go some new documentation interfaces that should help make using the toolbox and learning about the toolbox a little more approachable for the first time people are going at it. So that's the main change related to Python 3 and Pro. And then we're also going to have some minor post-processing edits for the new data model. That's not going to affect any of our users submitting data. It's just some stuff on the backside that we need to change to account for a couple formatting differences between version 2 and version 3. And then we've got a couple bug fixes. Pretty much the only bugs that I'm aware of are related to some of the address point GOM tag comparisons for the road centerline overlap. That's looking at the road range versus the address point GOM tags. If you have any additional errors that I'm missing here or any problems you run into, please reach out and let me know. But these were all pretty minor. I think we're all related to just one address point in the places they popped up. But we need to review a little bit the ESM boundary differentiator when it relates to a road center line that's broken at ESM boundary and making sure that it properly recognizes that that can have a different range as long as the ESN is different. And we had one instance of a false positive where some road centerline segments were marked as not authoritative, and it didn't properly recognize that. Need to review some of the self-overlapping scenarios. We found one instance where it was overlapping with itself. That wasn't caught because we were trying to prevent it from submitting errors for checking against itself. So it just needs to be a little cleanup there. And then also something for the segments that are marked as both sides of the road, just making sure it's kind of similar to the self-overlap scenario. So if you've had any issues with anything similar to those, those should be fixed. But if you have anything else that we haven't caught that you've seen when you're trying to account for those overlaps with your address points, your MSAGs, please let us know, and we can roll those in with the next update as well. And yeah, this is just a tool change for our hosts of the databases. And at some point when that rolls out, we'll adjust the tool so you can take the TN records, the telephone customer records, and compare them to your GIS data and make sure that they're all up to date. But we'll also have some reporting coming out potentially that will also do that kind of more proactively, as opposed to you having to run a tool for it. But we want you to have the option. And that'll do it for me. As usual, there's a story map available. I talked about the toolbox changes as they come out. And that's my contact information. So if you have any problems with either your submissions or something not looking right, I'm always here to help. So feel free to shoot me an email or give me a call, and I'm happy to help you out looking at your data with anything I can give you a hand with. So thanks.
All right, thanks, Will. Now we're going to do a audio check to see if Sherry can join us.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you. Okay, we will go backwards and let you take over from there. Thanks, Sherry.
Wonderful. I gave a brilliant introduction the first time around. It's just that nobody could hear it.
I'm sure it was.
So there was a piece of legislation, House Bill 2690, that passed this session, has been signed by the governor, and is law, that made some pretty substantial changes to the Kansas 911 Act. Some of those impact GIS. I'm going to talk about those kind of specifically, but most of the impacts have to do with the Kansas 911 Coordinating Council becoming a state agency, which will happen in 2025. So I'll kind of cover all of that, and I'll cover it sort of in the time that it takes place. So July 1 of 24, there are a couple of really big kind of validation points for GIS. So first of all, GIS data is specifically called out now as an allowable use of 911 fees. So this may not mean a whole lot if you don't mess with PSAP stuff, but there are very specific statutory uses for 911 fee money. And the maintenance of GIS data has always kind of been squeezed in to sort of other sections of allowable uses where, I mean, it fits. It's not like it was inappropriate, but it wasn't specifically called out, so technically it was open to interpretation. And this was actually not something that we requested. Senator Marcy Francisco suggested that with the importance of GIS data, she would like to see it called out specifically as an allowable use. And so this was her amendment to the bill. We are grateful for her attention, and it does mean that down the road there won't be somebody that looks at the language and says, you know what, maybe not GIS. I don't know if that was a likelihood, but we certainly have it covered now, because maintenance and updates that are necessary to maintain accurate GIS data are an allowable use of fees. And that may also mean that as technology evolves and the use of GIS data in 911 technology evolves, that may be sort of protective for us as things progress, that we don't have to go back and ask for legislative changes to keep up with the times, if you will. So it's kind of exciting. The other thing that happens on July 1st is that cities and counties, the legislation actually calls it governing bodies, who contract with other cities and counties to have their 911 calls answered. The whole structure of how that might work is laid out in this bill. But from a GIS perspective, the big thing is that they are still statutorily required to continue maintaining their GIS data. And this was something that we did ask for. And the idea behind it is if County X pays County Y to answer all their 911 calls, the GIS data is still the responsibility of County X. And we wanted to be very sure that was clear with everyone, because as you guys know, the local knowledge about the area, about roads, about addresses is critical to keeping that data up to date. And it's not something you can just outsource to another county and expect them to be as plugged into the local requirements. So we were very excited to see that go in there and sort of clarify that point. And both of these, in my opinion, are validating the importance of GIS data and the legislature recognizing the need to secure GIS data for 911 purposes going forward. So kind of excited. But then you could go to the next one. On July 1 of 2025, the Kansas 911 Coordinating Council is abolished, and the State 911 Board, which is a fee-funded state agency, will be created. That makes it sound like something big is going to happen, but the truth is the name changes and all the people stay the same. Because every member of the Coordinating Council, voting or non-voting, on June 30th will be a member of the State 911 Board on July 1st. The only change that happens in terms of who is on the council/board is that two of the currently non-voting members become voting members, and that is the Kansas Association of Counties recommended member and the League of Kansas Municipalities recommended member. And frankly, since counties and cities fund a substantial portion of 911 through their general fund, this was probably something that that is a long time coming, I'll say, and they should have people in that position on the board by July of 2025. I think one of those positions is currently open, but we're waiting for an appointment. So that's kind of an interesting change that will happen, but it's really the only change that will happen on the composition of the council. However, on that date, all employees, contracts, and property of the council become employees, contracts, and property of the board. And that is more complicated than it sounds, but it is something that is statutorily required. From a GIS perspective, what happens on July 1st of 25 is the wording for the requirements or statutory obligations on the State 911 Board changes to this. So the State 911 Board will be required to establish minimum training requirements for GIS and IT technicians with respect to the statewide 911 call handling technology. So this is obviously something, at least on the GIS side of things, that we already do with the GIS data maintainer requirement. But again, we did that because everybody needed to understand what was going on, and this is a statutory change. It also means that long-term, the State 911 Board will be required to continue defining that training and making sure that that it is available for GIS maintainers and potentially IT technicians. And if you're curious about the IT side of that, it's in there because of all of the computers and network equipment that gets installed at 911 centers. And currently there is no training or minimum training standard for the IT people that may have the requirement locally to mess with that kind of thing. And it was sort of a surprise that IT technicians language was in there. So the council doesn't have anything in mind. So don't be thinking there's like this big, suddenly your IT people are going to have to meet a certain standard coming. There will be a lot of discussion about that if it is going to come to pass, and it wouldn't even, that discussion wouldn't even start probably until July of 25. But if you want to tease your IT people and tell them they have to go to GIS maintainer training, I totally get it and would highly recommend that you take the opportunity to do that. We'll keep you informed of what comes up from that in the long term. But right now, that language for GIS purposes just refers to the GIS data maintainer class. So then I wanted to give you guys kind of an idea of the practical impact. So practically, there's really not much happening in the short term for GIS other than that statutory validation that I told you about. In the long term, it could mean a lot of things. There could be some additional training that the council either endorses or provides. There are certainly going to be more partnerships with what will be by then other state agencies in terms of data sharing, in terms of putting data into the various applications like Radius, the mapping application in the PSAP, and Lightning, the companion to that for field responders. But all of those things are quite long-term, so we'll keep you informed. And then I put a little note on here that Sherry is working on the transition. So the council has tasked me with working on the transition to a state agency from a budgetary and policy and all kinds of perspectives. So I found that little thing there because my brain right now really does have too many tabs open. And so if you have sent me a message or you have asked me something and I have not responded to you in a timely manner, pester me. You'll need to, because what's happened is that I lost your tab in the back of that list. And I apologize for it. I'm doing my best to keep up, but it is getting just a touch overwhelming right now. So you guys are still my first concern. You're just not always the squeakiest wheel right now. So please make sure that you do squeak and get my attention, because this is my first love and my first dedication. I want to make sure that if you need me, you have the opportunity to hear from me. So next, since I kind of mentioned the data sharing idea, I want to talk just a little bit about the Lightning app. I talked about this in the previous user group meeting, but Lightning is a mobile version of Radius mapping, and the idea is that it would be used by responders in the field. It's currently being tested by pilot agencies across the state, and it is very likely that we will begin making it broadly available outside of those pilot entities in the June or July timeframe. What we were waiting for the whole time was for the application to actually support providing the GIS data that you guys maintain out to the field. And that functionality just got introduced to the app. So we are working on testing map performance and configuration. For whatever reason, just as an example, the labeling of road names and address numbers that exist in the Radius map look much smaller on the phone, and not just because the screen is smaller, but they actually appear to be a smaller font. So that's one of many little things that we're looking at to try to make sure we have a version of the map that makes sense and works well in the app. Once we get something that we're satisfied with and we release it to the pilot users and they give their feedback and we kind of deal with that sort of back and forth and make sure it's in pretty good shape, then we will be scheduling more agencies to get access to it. Because right now it just doesn't have kind of the feature set that anyone cares about very much. Our pilot agencies are making use of it, but they are making use of it in a limited fashion because it really doesn't provide them a whole lot of anything else until that local data gets in there. So we are in the testing process for that, and you'll be seeing it out there soon. I can tell you that we have done a couple of presentations where we have shown those same responders what the radius map looks like and the kind of data that's coming, and they are super excited. Of all of the really simple things, one of the things in radius is when you zoom in far enough, all of the address points have the house number as the label. And I've had 3 now different presentations where I've shown that and had somebody just go, for that alone, I would have this app on my phone. And I thought, how simple, you know, we were thinking about all of these different data sources and all of these ways that we might be able to get useful information in there. And the truth is, a good quality map with locally curated data is gold all by itself. You don't have to hang a bunch of gewgaws off of it, because that by itself is just critical. And sometimes I think we in the GIS world just kind of forget how novel that can be for people who really need that kind of location data. So anyway, Lightning is a pretty big project. There'll be a lot of different stuff coming up about it over the next few years, but that's where it's sitting right now. And I wanted you guys to be aware of it. So do we want to skip down to my other slides?
Yeah, let's skip down, but before Sherry skips to the next topic, just want to recognize all of Sherry's efforts on the 911 bill, because she has been the presence at the State House. She's gone to House committee hearings, Senate committee hearings, testified if needed, been in the background for questions, worked closely with senators and representatives. So to say that she's got a lot of tabs open in her brain is kind of an understatement, but she's been a great champion for all of us. So we're lucky to have Sherry in that position.
Thank you. That's very kind. So switching gears just a little bit, I wanted to kind of touch on a couple of things that, again, we have talked about in previous user group meetings, but just kind of to make sure that everybody understands and that we kind of give you an update on sort of where things sit. Inside the radius mapping application, there is a button for 911 telecommunicators to use to report issues with location information on the map. They actually have a couple of different ways to do that, but for both of those ways, what happens is an email is created with whatever information they put in, and that email goes a few places. One of them is to the current maintainer, GIS data maintainer for that PSAP. And so I just kind of wanted to touch base on this. I know, like I said, we've talked about it before, but they are going to be reporting issues with that locally maintained data. Things like address corrections and road name issues are what we see probably most often that are actually locally maintained data issues. But they also occasionally report problems with the mapping services themselves. That's, of course, on us. The layers either not working or not updating. Caching issues with browsers, I think, will drive us mad. And as a former IT director and as a GIS person, I really don't like constantly telling people just turn it off and back on again. But unfortunately, for a lot of these mapping service issues, that's really the answer, because it's a cache in the browser causing the issue. Anyway, we've done some training with the PSAPs about location technology, because how the phone location works can really affect the results that they see on the screen. And that's something that I will continue to do over time. I think it's critical for telecommunicators to understand a little bit about how all of that works, just so that when it doesn't work quite like they expect, they have some idea about why. But from a map discrepancy reporting perspective, I just want to let you guys know that some people are always going to relate any problem with location to a problem with the map. They're either going to complain about the map not working, which we do get, not as much as we used to, but we do still hear it sometimes, or they're going to complain about the map data. Over 80% of 911 calls are cellular, and cellular calls have their location come in by coordinate. So they just plot on the map. There is nothing about the local GIS data that can change that. So when you get these map discrepancy reports, understand that we review every one that comes in. And if you get one, you should review it too. It should be pretty obvious if it's something you can change, like somebody saying, hey, that's not the address on that house, or hey, this isn't, you know, Bluebird Road, it's Bluebird Drive or whatever. But if you look at what they've said, or if they've said so little that you just don't quite know what to do, or if this is something that is yours to worry about, or if we should be fixing it, please reach out to us for help. And we'll let you know what we know and what we've done, and explain to you whatever it is that we need to, so that you understand what you just got. And so that you can have good communication with your PSAPs as well, about maybe what more information you need when they're reporting something to you. So like I said, if you have any questions, let us know. And a couple of updates that aren't so much updates. There's just not a lot of change. Data model version 3 is done. The last time we had a user group meeting, I had this exact same thing. The new version is complete. And then Eileen, who is a way better proofreader than I am, went through and said, hey, we're missing a couple of things. So now it really is complete. And now once we get all of things in line, we will put it out to everybody. There has not been a real time pressure for this one, because it's really more about making the document better for you. There's been some reorganization and a reprioritization of some of the layers just to better reflect what we actually do with the data now. And then we've added several appendices to the document, just with additional reference information about how your data is used to make MSAGs, how your data is used for a variety of purposes, 911 related, so that if you have any question, like, hey, I was thinking of making this change, how might it affect people downstream, that you can go to those appendices and look. So we're excited to get the document to you, but there's not going to be any real impact on how you do data maintenance that way. Similarly, the national data model is also working on their own version 3. And my best guess is that it'll be ready in the 4th quarter of this year. There are a lot of changes in this model from version 2, but nothing huge that would affect our maintainers in Kansas. And that is because we do a lot of processing on your data after you give it to us in order to meet those NENA requirements. And that's one of the new appendices in the data model, is kind of explaining to you, if you wanted to go look at that national standard, how we get your data to meet it when you give it to us. But because of that post-processing that we do, we don't have to say, okay, everybody, you're going to have to change gears now because the national standard has changed. And we did that deliberately in our program design. And so far, at least, with everything coming out for V3, that is working out pretty well. So next slide, please. We are going to be doing the data maintainer training at the pre-conference at CAM. And just like last year, I have this question in there: is there anything specific you would like to see covered? Because if there is, we will be happy to add it. It's been, we've done some updates to the class version and design over the years, but largely those have been driven by the questions that we get over the course of the year and by the evolution of the program. So if you have something specific that you would like us to talk about in some detail, please let us know. And I say us, just like last year, Will is going to weigh in on the toolbox and some of the issues people run into with that. And we may even have a few other guest speakers for the class. You just never know. So On the horizon, this is what I called it during the user group last time, is the public safety platform issue. And this is kind of a strange discussion. So you've been hearing about the public safety platform and us working with them and doing testing with them for a very long time. But the Transitional Data Management Service, or TDMS, that we have been working with them and testing with them on is now on pause. The AT&T executive leadership has decided that they need to do more evaluation before they determine if this is a product they actually want to use anywhere outside of the testing they have done with us. So while that is a little frustrating given the amount of work and effort and time, it is probably the best idea given the fact that we're just not entirely certain they thought it through all the way. So we are on pause. Since we are on pause, and this just happened a couple of weeks ago, you guys are going to be getting a notification about training and getting an ID and all that stuff for the public safety platform. So there's no reason that you won't be able to, or there's no reason for you to not be able to log in and see the MSAGs and see the results of your GIS data, because we're not going to be changing the rules on you anytime soon. So if you get an email that says, hey, here's your new ID for PSP, and here are a list of training dates that you can attend an online training, don't be too shocked. We don't know exactly when that's going to happen, but it'll be fairly soon. And understand that there's probably not a major pressure for you to log in and mess with it all the time. I will say that for the last couple of years, I have been handling all problems statewide that required logging in to look at stuff, or very nearly all problems. And that has not been a terrible burden. Statewide, this GIS data conversion for MSAGs has been going very well. The telephone companies are working with it very well. While there are things that occasionally come up, for the most part, it's been very effective. That said, you should be able to get in there and take a look at it. If you have any questions, you shouldn't be required to reach out to me, which is why we're going to get you IDs and get you going. But at the same time, if you aren't sure, if you look in there and you don't know what to do, or if you just go, hey, I don't even know how to get this started, you're certainly welcome to reach out, and I'll be more than happy to answer any questions you have with it. We are likely to put together kind of a how to use PSP for GIS maintainers, but that will just take a little time. And as was referenced in an earlier slide, I have too many tabs open right now to kind of work through that. But once I get a little time to do so, I think that we'll probably just have like a very short webinar and probably like a 1 or 2 page instruction sheet. Like I said, there isn't a whole lot for you guys to do in there because you can't even edit any of that data. It's just look at it, but we'll help you out in any way we can. So keep an eye out for that email and know that we are here and got your back. As a result, though, of that, I do want to point out, too, that there is a new report that will be coming. We have started receiving them, and we're working on the process of getting them cut into pieces and sent out to you guys in an automated fashion. But what it is a list of telephone record addresses that do not have address points. They're still routing properly. Everything's fine because your road center lines create the MSAGs and they match and all that's good. But part of the Kansas NG911 GIS data standard is that you have to have an address point for every telephone record. And the reason for that, or an address point for every telephone address, the reason for that is so that you guys locally are dictating the coordinate that is going to be used when a call comes from that phone number. So the way the PSP system works, they give us a report every week of all of the telephone records that don't have a matching address point. And now that we know we're not going to be messing with their TDMS, we'll go ahead and cut that report into pieces and send it off to you guys so that you can begin adding those address points. It's entirely possible when you get this report. There will be some instructions when we send it out to you the first time, but it's entirely possible that you're going to see some addresses that need to change. That the reason they don't have address points isn't that you're missing an address point, it's that that address is an old one or an inaccurate one. So just be prepared to take a look at that report. And like I said, we'll provide some instructions on how to go through it.
All right, any questions? I don't see anything in the chat at this point, so be sure to put your questions in the chat. Thanks for that update, Sherry. I think we'll just move into wrap up then. So we'll continue our quarterly user group webinars to share any information to you all, whether it's imagery, legislation, or you know, geo-IMSAGs. Hopefully we've got you covered here. We also plan on having another GIS data maintainer class at the CAM conference in this fall, which is going to be in Lawrence. I don't remember the exact dates, but I believe it's October of this year. And again, as a reminder, you don't have to sign up and attend CAM for that. It is a free pre-conference session that we've worked with CAM, and they've graciously always provided space for us to have that workshop. So more information as the conference gets organized on that and the dates. And you might have seen a slight change. So at one Kansas 911 has this learning platform that they use for training for all the call handling and PSAP personnel. Well, Sherry's created training for the GIS data stewards, and that's loaded and stored and accessed through the learning platform. And the idea was that we were going to do that for the GIS data maintainer training too, but it got complicated, meaning that you guys started getting emails saying, oh, you need to do this training or that training, and that wasn't applicable to our GIS users. So we made the decision that we're not going to put maintainer training on this learning platform because there was no way to identify and monitor who got what notifications and who had to take what exactly. So we're thinking that as we kind of reorganize the maintainer training and like Sherry said, maybe include some guest speakers or just organize a little bit differently, we're going to try to do a recording of that as well. That would be posted on the Coordinating Council, I guess soon to be 911 board website, as well as on the DASC hub. So I doubt we'll see that before the CAM maintainer class this fall, but you know, who knows, maybe we'll carve out some time and get that done, but we'll certainly keep you posted if we have some new training available and posted. As always, we'll post this recording, the slides, any other information and updates on the imagery, everything like that. You can be found on the DASC hubs under the 911 initiative and also on the Kansas 911 Coordinating Council website. All right, and with that, Sherry, Will, did you have any other comments to add before we close out? And again, if you have a question, put it in the chat now or unmute and ask your question.
Nothing else.
I don't have anything else.
Okay. All right. I'm not seeing any questions, so I guess we covered it well today. All right. Well, thank you everyone for joining us. And as always, reach out to us if something comes up and you have some questions. We'd be happy to help out. All right. Thanks, everyone. Take care. Bye-bye.